The Spinoff Podcast Network. Kia ora e te iwi, ngā mihi o te wā o Waitangi. This is Te Aihe Butler, producer for The Fold. As part of our Waitangi coverage this year, the Spinoff sent a small team consisting of myself and my colleagues, Ātia editor Liam Ratana, political reporter Lyric Waiwiri-Smith, and head of audience Anna Rafiti Connell, up north to cover proceedings direct from the treaty grounds. Lyric, Liam and I went down to the beach on the afternoon of Waitangi Day to record this special edition of The Fold, looking at how the media covers Waitangi and our own experiences, writing stories and shooting content throughout the week. Ngā mihi, and we hope you enjoy.
Kia ora koutou katoa, ko Liam Ratana tōku ingoa, e mihi ana kia koutou katoa. We're coming to you live today with a very special episode of The Fold. Obviously, I am not Duncan Grieve, but I am joined by my colleagues, Te Aihe Butler, who is currently reclining awkwardly into a kayak, trying to hide from the sun, and our political reporter for the Spinoff, Lyric Waiwiri-Smith. Kia ora kōrua.
Kia ora.
So we are obviously here at Waitangi, and today we're going to be talking about life as reporters and media people at Waitangi and sort of what the journey is like covering these sorts of events. Lyric and I, for those of you who are unaware, went to Kingi Tū Heitia Potatau Te Whiro Te Tuawhitu, his tangihanga September last year it was. And so that was sort of our first journey as the Spinoff Māori reporter duo.
Māori unit
going to quite a big kaupapa Māori, and this year, today, we've just wrapped covering Waitangi. So, Lyric, we had quite a big campaign around this to really cover Waitangi well. We had a handful of meetings and other things, but sitting here on the beach, it's now 2:30 just about in the afternoon on the 6th of February. How do you feel like we've gone?
Sheesh, that was long, eh? I feel pretty tired. I guess at Waitangi you're not really short for stories. Definitely, I feel like we had our angles change a few times and
Naturally.
This
is your second?
This is my second time being at Waitangi. My first time I went with a group of student journos, volunteers from 95 BFM, and we just did some recordings and tested it out. But that was very casual, nowhere near as intense as, working nearly 12-hour days, reporting and running around, trying to be at every media stand-up all at once, trying to find someone to talk to, getting your grabs, getting your interviewees, getting your story. It's pretty intensive.
We had a handful of meetings coming here, so I'm sort of acutely aware, obviously, of the planning that we did for this. But for yourself, did you have a special approach or anything that you really wanted to do or cover while we were here, or was it much use planning, or do you feel like it's better to sort of be more on the fly with these things?
It's good to know, but I'm also just a creature of sometimes intense organisation. Exactly when and where things are happening, who's going to be talking about what at what time, that makes it, when you're reporting on politics and you know that Marama Davidson and Chloe Swarbrick are going to be somewhere at 2 p.m. taking questions, that's when you pose the questions you want to ask them and get a story out of it. I feel like you can plan as much as you like, and then maybe something will happen and like the Ngāpui settlement, that happened this week and you picked it up, I guess because it's close to home.
Yeah, so for context for the listeners who might not be aware, a release was put out Friday afternoon, great time for a press release, about Ngāpui, or a hapu of Ngāpui, receiving some redress in the form of a farm block, which was, don't quote me on this, but I think it was around 240-something acres, one of the two. Should be a bit more precise, but that was sort of the angle, or that was what they used, the hook for them, saying that they're showing their commitment towards Ngāpui settling, and it blew up into the government is ready to settle, but Ngāpui isn't. And so, like you said, I read that email a day later after it got forwarded to me, and sat up till midnight writing a story about it because I found it quite interesting, and I felt like it hadn't really been spoken about much. And
you naturally gravitate towards stories that you know you can do well,
or that you have an interest in, like
something that
like you.
means something to you. If we had the outfit that RNZ had, where they had like 1 million reporters, we could have covered an incredible amount of stories. But with just a 3-person team, Te Aihe focused on creating visual content, and then yourself and myself doing sort of long form stories. It's you got to kind of think about what is the most important thing that's happening, and then I guess as a spin-off, how to make it spin off.
Yeah, just on the topic of RNZ, do you rate their setup as the best here at Waitangi? Or they had the biggest tent, they had Starlink, they had tech support
Wi-Fi
on site, and a multitude of reporters. Their equipment, you said they had a whole podcast studio. They were literally going live with Julian Wilcox and Mihingarangi Forbes.
Absolutely. When you have that level of audience, you have that level of talent working with you, they needed to have the tech setup of Doom in their tent, and they had it.
They feel like, resource-wise, the strongest outlet in the country at the moment, and that it was very obvious, very visible.
It really needs to be noted, they were super generous to us with their...
Yeah, thank you, RNZ.
They embodied the spirit of manaakitanga.
Kia ora, Auntie Shannon.
Auntie Shannon. And actually, you spoke to Auntie Shannon for a little bit about her experiences coming to Waitangi.
Yeah, I wanted to touch on Shannon Honu Thompson, who is the Kaihotu Māori or something along those lines. And while she's not sort of on the front line reporting anymore, she has done, over 10 Waitangis. She's sort of like the glue of RNZ's coverage of things like the Tangihanga or Waitangi Day, and it's quite cool to see people filling that role. And as soon as we rocked up, she saw us, she's like, oh, you guys can use a seat if you want, and they had the tent and all the gear set up, and we may or may not have gotten on to their Wi-Fi also.
I don't know if they know that we were using their Wi-Fi, so
Maybe
thank
we'll
you,
leave
Shannon,
that,
and everyone else at RNZ.
Feels like a very spin-off thing to do, eh?
You asked her a little bit about the changes that have taken place within the media coverage of Waitangi over the years, and how she ended up taking on this kaiafi role and looking after other media outlet people covering the place. And she had this to say.
Back when I first started in TV, it was extremely competitive. We're literally in our own little corners of the field planning a strategy to outdo each other, which, we're all going to be filming the same poere, we're all going to be filming the same kōrero. So, in those moments, we should be working together to make it happen.
Too right, Auntie. Too right. Like letting the spin-off racks your Wi-Fi and snacks and chairs.
I think that's the embodiment of what she's talking about, right? Is
pretty much.
When we came, like I said, she just greeted us with open arms, really, and it was a warm reception for all three of us, really, coming here to Waitangi to cover it for the first time together. And I feel like it's those people. Obviously, we've got her, we've got Lyric's Auntie Kata from Te Karere. They're like the old kuia or aunties in the kitchen who have all the logistics down
I just
pat.
felt Shannon shudder at you calling her kuia.
Yeah, Auntie Shannon.
It's also worth noting that was the reception we got when we first arrived to the press area at the Waitangi Treaty Grounds, after initially being turned away from the road blockade for basically not being prestigious enough of a media outlet, I would say.
Yeah, they said we needed a pass to pick up our media pass, and I was like, well, I wish I had John Campbell's face, because that would have been my pass.
To me, translated as, you're not John Campbell, you're not Mihingarangi Forbes, you're not Julian Wilcox.
Who the fuck are you?
Go walk the long way.
And we did. And we walked the hard yards to bring this coverage. We were almost stopped in our tracks. But here we are.
I think I was told that even Mihi Forbes got her daughter, Te Aihe Butler, to go and
apologies to
get
Mihi.
her media pass. So aside from the reporting itself, I think it's important that as young Māori journalists and media people, we sort of take time to enjoy these opportunities, as well as like stressing out from all of the work and everything that we have to get done. I think it's important to sometimes take a breather and a step back and sort of look at where we are as people. And I've really enjoyed being able to do that with you guys up here, sort of close to where I'm come from. So that's been a personal highlight for me.
You killed it, bro.
And work-wise, I think a fun part has been providing the most comprehensive coverage the Spinoff has ever had of Waitangi.
With the help of our 13,000 members, although we need 5,000 more.
We do need more members.
If you've enjoyed it, think about making a regular contribution to the Spinoff, no pressure.
And then one day we can have our own Wi-Fi.
Or a golf cart.
Or a golf cart. Yeah.
Golf cart, which for context is used by all of the flash media outlets to get up and down the treaty grounds.
To be fair, I think it's just TVNZ that has lease on a golf cart.
I think we might have to ask our office manager to help suss that.
I feel like the problem there is that we severely lack the complete mana that Kata holds. I mean,
We do.
But the importance of the golf cart is that there's just a lot of walking. And when we saw Harata Brown cruising on one, we were like, God
Slightly
damn.
envious. Slightly.
We joke about the golf cart as a status symbol, but in practical terms, it is hot and it is sweaty, and it's at least a 10-minute walk getting from one part of the treaty grounds to another. And you add that up over the course of a day, and you are pretty knackered by the end of it.
But have you closed all your fitness rings this week?
Multiple times over.
Same.
I wanted to talk about, well, if I jump back a little bit to what we were speaking about before with the planning side of things, I think it might have been the day before or late last week when we got a whisper that it was going to be Māori media only allowed at Waitangi, and the messaging was a bit confusing, and I feel like we've had to deal with a few communication issues along the way. Have you found that difficult at all to navigate, or is it sort of just rolling with the punches?
Yeah, well, got an email that said something along the lines of that, Māori media only in the Waitangi forum tent. That turned out to just not be true. Anyone could go in there and hang around.
What's a Māori media, though? That's what I'm interested in.
I suppose, I guess it's, Te Karere Whakaata Māori. I suppose, the Herald wouldn't count because it's not rooted in Te Ao Māori. Wasn't the Herald created to promote the Waikato Wars?
What I will say is that Simon Wilson was the Herald reporter here, or one of them at least.
Famously former Spinoff writer.
So it's quite interesting to think that, we heard these whispers about Māori media and then maybe got a little bit paranoid, but could you imagine how Simon Wilson felt when he heard it? I wonder how he feels.
All love to Simon, but I bet he was like, well, I'll just go in there anyway.
You didn't ask him about it when you spoke to him?
No, because it turned out to just not be the case. So what we talked about instead was him he's not grown up in this world, so he's had to, work up his knowledge over the years of going to Waitangi about how things work, and I guess not viewing it from a Pākehā lens.
Did he give any good examples of that happening for him?
He did. Here's Simon Wilson.
I was here a few years ago, and it was an occasion when the media were able to get into the iwi chairs forum, and that's not always the case. So I witnessed Pini Henare, who was the minister at the time, singing a waiata after his speech, and none of his caucus colleagues knew the waiata, so he had to sing it on his own, and he must have known that would happen. And what he told me later was that it was the waiata that his grandfather James Henare had sung after the Second World War and the exploits of the Māori battalion, when he had gone around all the marae in the country to talk about what they'd done, to see what he could do to help the reintegration of Māori battalion members back into the community, and talk about what would happen next. And that was the waiata he used there. Every Māori leader in the room would have known that. Yeah. Journalists like me had to be told, but gosh, did I feel privileged to witness it.
What I wanted to bring up on the subject of white guys covering Waitangi, and not to single them out or that I've got anything against them, but I couldn't help but laugh at Guy Williams running around in his, was it a maroon suit that he had on yesterday? Or
I think it was
like a
cream.
Yeah.
I don't know, because he's so tall that I saw him everywhere. He was kind of like the statue lingering over while, the poor hoodie was going on, and he was just doing a piece to cam.
I think he wanted to obviously get something while he was here. He's travelled to Waitangi to cover it for his program, and it was sort of the battle between Mikey Sherman and Guy Williams during the Pohiri with David Seymour going to pick up the takia that had been laid, and I just kept getting distracted by Mikey Sherman telling Guy Williams to shush when he was trying to film. It was quite hilarious.
He was kind of out of his depth compared to the journalists, because I suppose, with media, we had a briefing that morning on how the day would go out, which we totally went to, and we listened to all of it. And I guess Guy, he's not a journalist, he's a personality?
He's a comedian.
A host? A comedian, yeah, that's what he is. I think journalists, especially ones in the press gallery, do not have a lot of patience for people who are getting in their way or who they think are getting in their way. Guy was there to do New Zealand Today and do something funny. I heard him talking to John Campbell and, being quite self-deprecating about, I'm not a real journalist and you are. But, it's interesting because someone like John Campbell, he was just beloved. He'd get a hello from everyone.
You're mates with John Campbell, eh?
My close and personal friend, John Campbell.
You guys are on first name terms?
Yeah. He was my reference for when I applied to be a staff reporter 2 years ago. So thank you, John, for kickstarting my career.
That's a pretty great reference to have. I mean, you couldn't really get much bigger than that, could you?
Bro. And I was really shit at that job for the first 6 months. So I bet they were like, God damn, John Campbell's a liar.
They still loved him. No matter what. That man can do no wrong.
We wanted him on the pod, but he was really busy. But I did ask him how it feels being the brownest white broadcaster in New Zealand, and he did say that, it's not a lot of competition there in terms of being the brownest, because I guess someone like him tiptoes that space of being just enough in the world of Te Ao Māori to get it and be respected, and he's had, quite a long career, but also just enough out to be not included in a lot of conflicts, and he doesn't have an iwi affiliation. He's sort of free to roam around. He's not talking to his family members, he's just talking to whoever he wants.
I'm pretty sure John Campbell would be a Ngāpuhi if he did have an iwi affiliation.
He's from Wellington.
I feel like there's a lot of iwi who would try and lay claim to that.
Wow, no, because I want him for Waikato Tainui, but he's from Wellington, so...
On the subject of John Campbell and famous media personalities, we haven't been short of any here at Waitangi 2025.
Hell no.
What's it been like for you, Lyric, as a younger than me Māori journalist, roaming Waitangi and seeing all these up there Māori journalists and media personalities and having a chance to sort of observe them and watch them do their things? Do you feel like you've been inspired, learnt anything, interacted with people that you might not have otherwise?
I think I've actually learnt the most from my friend Tu Whenua, who is a reporter at RNZ, probably because we're, close friends. He's been going to Waitangi since he was a baby. I think he told me he's only ever missed one in his life. And someone with that real built-up knowledge, someone who has been here outside of work just because it's his life, is really helpful, because he made a point. We were talking about protesters and whether protester is a fair name, and he suggested to me that actually it might be more fair to just refer to the protesters in Eru Kapakingi's Toitu Te Tiriti demonstration as haukāinga, so, the locals, because they are just on their own whenua and they're speaking their truth. So I was quite grateful to have that korero with him, because I think I would have just run with protesters.
Yeah, for some people it's just a matter of optics, but for others it can be it can have quite a different meaning when you're calling someone an activator compared to a protester or whatever. So that's a good lesson, I guess, that you got from him, which is quite cool.
Yep. The 25-year-olds imparting institutional wisdom on a young Māori journalist. You guys can just jump straight to
kaumātua status by the time you're 40, I reckon.
Oh, bro, by the time I'm 30.
This 25-year-old just dispensing sagely advice and wisdom.
But also, on the subject of talking about protesters and politics, I think we also had spoken about the fact that politics is such a small part of Waitangi for many people. And here's to talking about that.
Things only get tense when the politicians turn up. It's effectively 6 days. From February 1st to February 6th, people are here enjoying themselves, soaking up the sun. And so it's kino just to focus on that one day, or those 2 days when things get heated.
Yeah, so on that note, it's quite cool to hear that Te Whenua was talking about that sort of stuff. I shared a similar conversation with Shannon, talking about how quite often the media can focus on the conflict side of things at Waitangi, and that as journalists we should really be careful to not just focus on the politics of it all, but also the celebration or commemorations that happen. Something that stuck out to me and quite a cool highlight for me personally was when all the politicians were up at Te Wharirunanga for the pōhiri. I was down the bottom at the Waitangi Forum tent, taking part or just sort of observing their kaupapa that was running at the same time, and I couldn't see any other journalists there, which was really buzzy for me, like knowing that every single journalist there is up at that other one, because that's where there's likely to be Seymour getting shouted at or the mics getting taken away and all this sort of stuff. But as someone who used to come to Waitangi as a child too, and staying here with my dad at, Tent City with all the sovereigntist uncles from up north, I really feel like they hold a very special place here at Waitangi, and their kaupapa is just as respected, if not even more so, by the haukāinga. And the haukāinga have their own kaupapa running down at Te Marae. Then we had a forum tent that Toitu Te Tiriti was in charge of, and Ere Kapakingi and the likes. So for me it was really important, and giving you the space to do your political stuff, and me focusing on the haukāinga stuff, which was really of interest to me, and
everyone and their dog and Guy Williams was on the upper treaty grounds. It is interesting because we were talking about having resources and some outlets having more people than others. At the end of the day, they were all at the pōhiri. And it's competitive, cutting in front of each other. You're chasing Seymour across the treaty grounds.
Mikey Sherman's telling you to shush.
Mikey Sherman's telling you to shush and, get out the way. But you're right in the sense that when you've got tunnel vision about how you're going to portray what your Waitangi coverage is all about, you don't open yourself up to other things going on. Like, we could have written so many spin-offy type stories. Like, I think I said to Aihe, we should have just photographed all the dogs we saw and then did like a Waitangi dog slideshow, and it would have been the most read story.
And in 2026 we will. So copyright Dogs of Waitangi, spinoff.co.nz.
But only if you become a member.
Only if you become a member.
I mean, photographing dogs is a lot more silly than going to the Waitangi Forum tent. So bad comparison, but I get what you mean. Everyone had the same goal. They want the same grabs and quotes. But that's sort of the nature of being in, the press galleries, which a lot of those journalists are from, like Mikey and Lillian Hanley at RNZ, and Laura Walters from Newsroom was there. And, they're used to chasing politicians and being on this beat. I'm really enjoying being the spin-off and going into places where people, where we should be covering, but people haven't really seen us there before, like the press gallery or like Waitangi for our most comprehensive coverage. Because it shows that we're here, we have a presence, we're serious about our work, and, it puts us out there and hopefully opens even more doors and opportunities for us.
Yeah, it's been sort of the coolest part of the experience in a way, is networking and socialising and catching up with a whole bunch of other Māori journos coming together for a pretty cool kaupapa, and also a whole bunch of aunties and relatives, and it's all helped me feel quite comfortable here at Waitangi. I don't know about you guys, but just the vibe in general has been pretty welcoming for us Māori journos.
Hard
to see the spin-off operating in that space and thriving really is quite cool. So here's to the next 20 years of Waitangi coverage.
But only if you become a member.
It's if I know if you've made it this far, you're clearly a massive fan of the Fold podcast with Duncan Grieve. And you should know that on February the 20th in Wellington at the Hannah Playhouse, Duncan's going to be hosting a live edition of The Fold. He's going to be recording it live on stage alongside Lucy Blackiston from Shit You Should Care About and Bernard Hickey from the Kaka and from the Spinoff Podcast Network's When the Facts Change. You can get your tickets at thespinoff.co.nz/events. Kia ora. The Spinoff Podcast Network.